The soft glow of crystal chandeliers filled every corner of the grand ballroom at the Meridian Hotel. Tonight was different from any ordinary evening. The city's most important people had gathered here for the annual charity gala, and the air buzzed with excitement and expensive perfume. Women in stunning evening gowns glided across the marble floor, their jewelry catching the light with every step. Men in perfectly tailored tuxedos stood in small groups, discussing business deals worth millions of dollars. The sound of gentle laughter mixed with the clinking of champagne glasses created a symphony of wealth and privilege. At the center of it all, round tables covered in white silk held the finest china and crystal glasses. Each table cost more to set than most people earned in a month. Fresh flowers from around the world decorated every surface, filling the room with their sweet fragrance. This wasn't just a dinner party. This was where the powerful came to see and be seen. Moving quietly between these tables was a young woman named Lisa. At 28 years old, she had learned to become almost invisible in rooms like this. She wore the standard black uniform of the catering staff, her hair pulled back neatly, a small name tag pinned to her chest. In her hands she carried a silver tray, refilling water glasses and removing empty plates with practiced grace. Lisa had been working events like this for 3 years now. It was her second job, something she did on weekends and evenings to make ends meet. During the day, she worked at a small diner downtown, serving coffee and sandwiches to construction workers and office employees. The tips were better here at fancy events, but the work was harder in a different way. Here, she had to smile and nod while being treated like she didn't exist. As she moved from table to table, conversations flowed around her as if she were invisible. At one table, a man in an expensive watch bragged about his new yacht. At another, women discussed their upcoming trips to Europe. Nobody made eye contact with her. Nobody said thank you when she refilled their glasses. To them, she was just part of the background, like the flowers or the fancy decorations, but Lisa noticed everything. She had always been good at watching and listening. She heard the businessman at table 6 complaining about his son's expensive college tuition. She saw the woman at table 3 checking her phone constantly, probably worried about something. At home, these people might be rich, but they had problems too. Just different ones than hers. The evening was supposed to feature live entertainment. A famous pianist from New York was scheduled to perform after dinner. People had been talking about it all week in the newspapers. The event organizers had spent a fortune to bring him here, and many guests had bought tickets specifically to hear him play. The beautiful black Steinway piano sat in the corner of the room like a sleeping giant, waiting for its moment to come alive. Lisa couldn't help but glance at the piano every time she passed it. Something about it called to her, made her fingers twitch unconsciously. She quickly looked away each time, focusing on her work. She had learned long ago not to draw attention to herself at these events. Her job was to blend in, serve quietly, and collect her paycheck at the end of the night. The dinner service was going smoothly when Lisa noticed the event coordinator looking stressed. The woman kept checking her phone and speaking in hushed, urgent tones to her assistant. Something was wrong, but Lisa couldn't tell what. She continued her work, clearing the main course plates and preparing for dessert service. Then she heard whispers starting at table 1, where the evening's main sponsors were seated. The whispers spread quickly from table to table like ripples. In a pond, Lisa caught fragments of conversation as she worked. Flight delayed ... Storm in Chicago ... Might not make it at all ... Her heart sank as she realized what was happening. The pianist wasn't coming. All these people had paid hundreds of dollars per ticket, partly to hear this world-famous musician play. Now they were going to be disappointed, and disappointed rich people could be very unpleasant to deal with. The event coordinator finally stepped up to the microphone at the front of the room. The conversations died down as everyone turned to. "Listen, ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice slightly shaky. "I'm afraid I have some disappointing news about tonight's entertainment." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some people shook their heads in frustration. Others pulled out their phones, probably checking flight information themselves. The coordinator continued, "Due to severe weather in Chicago, our featured pianist has been unable to travel. All flights have been canceled or delayed indefinitely." The murmur grew louder. Lisa could see the disappointment and anger on many faces. These weren't people who were used to having their plans disrupted. At table 4, a man was already gesturing to his wife, pointing toward the exit. Other guests began looking around uncomfortably, unsure whether to stay or leave. "We're doing everything we can to find alternative entertainment," the coordinator added quickly, but her words seemed to fall flat. The damage was done. The evening's main attraction was gone, and no last-minute replacement could match what people had been expecting. Lisa continued serving dessert, but she could feel the energy in the room changing. Conversations became shorter and more stilted. Some people were already asking for their coats. The beautiful ballroom that had been full of life and excitement just minutes ago now felt heavy with disappointment. As she worked, Lisa's eyes kept drifting back to the piano. It sat there unused, its polished surface reflecting the chandelier light. All that beauty and potential just sitting silent while people filed out disappointed. It seemed like such a waste. She had learned to play piano as a child. Her grandmother had insisted on lessons, saying music was food for the soul. Lisa had loved it then, spending hours practicing scales and simple songs. As she got older, she had gotten quite good, even winning a few local competitions in high school. She had dreamed of studying music in college, maybe becoming a teacher, or even a performer herself, but life had other plans. When her grandmother got sick, the music lessons stopped. The money went to medical bills instead. After graduation, Lisa had to work immediately to help support her family. There was no time or money for college, let alone music dreams. The piano at her grandmother's house had been sold years ago to help pay for the funeral. Now, watching this beautiful instrument sit unused while people left disappointed, Lisa felt an old familiar ache in her chest. She remembered how it felt to make music, to pour emotions into melodies and watch people's faces light up when they heard something beautiful. She missed that feeling more than she cared to admit, but this wasn't her world. She was here to work, not to dream. She finished serving the dessert course and began clearing tables, trying to ignore the growing number of empty chairs as guests continued to leave early. The evening that had started with such promise was ending in disappointment. And there was nothing she could do about it, or was there? Lisa moved through the ballroom with practiced efficiency, but her mind wasn't entirely on her work anymore. The disappointment in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. She could hear it in every conversation, see it in every gesture. People who had come expecting a magical evening were now checking their watches and whispering about early departures. At table 7. An elderly woman was explaining to her companions how she had specifically chosen this charity gala because of the promised piano performance. "I haven't heard live classical music in months," she said sadly, adjusting her pearl necklace. "My late husband used to take me to concerts every weekend. I was so looking forward to tonight." Lisa's heart tugged as she overheard this. She carefully placed a fresh napkin beside the woman's coffee cup, wishing she could somehow make the evening better for her. But what could a waitress do? She was nobody special, just someone trying to make enough money to pay her bills. Moving to the next table, she caught another conversation. A middle-aged man was telling his business partner, "I brought 3 potential clients tonight specifically because of the entertainment. Now what am I supposed to tell them? This makes me look unprofessional." The frustration was spreading like wildfire through the room. Lisa had worked enough of these events to know that unhappy guests meant unhappy organizers, which usually meant the catering staff would bear the brunt of everyone's bad mood. Tips would be smaller, complaints would be louder, and the whole evening would end on a sour note. She glanced toward the front of the room where the event coordinator was still making frantic phone calls. The poor woman looked like she was about to cry. Her assistant stood nearby with a laptop, probably searching desperately for any available musicians in the area. But Lisa knew it was hopeless. Any pianist good enough for this crowd would already be booked on a Saturday night. As she cleared empty champagne glasses from table 12, Lisa found herself standing near the piano again. This close, she could see the intricate details carved into its wooden frame. The keys were perfectly white and black, not a fingerprint or speck of dust on them. It was the kind of instrument she had only dreamed of playing as a child, without thinking. Her right hand moved slightly, fingers positioning themselves as if she were about to play a C major scale. The muscle memory was still there after all. These years. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. Music never leaves you, dear. It lives in your heart forever, waiting for the right moment to come out. Excuse me, are you finished with this table? Lisa jumped, quickly pulling her hand back to her side. A guest was looking at her impatiently, pointing to his empty dessert plate. Yes, sir, sorry, she mumbled, quickly clearing his place setting. She scolded herself for daydreaming. This wasn't the time or place for childhood memories, but as she worked, pieces of her past kept floating back to her mind. She remembered her first recital at age 10, wearing a white dress her grandmother had saved for months to buy. She had played Fur Elise and received a standing ovation from the small audience of family and friends. Her grandmother had tears in her eyes that day, telling everyone who would listen how proud she was. There had been other moments too. Winning second place at the county youth competition when she was 15, playing at her high school graduation ceremony, the acceptance letter to the state music program that she had never been able to accept because there wasn't enough money for tuition and living expenses. All those dreams had been packed away like childhood toys, stored in the back of her mind where they couldn't hurt anymore. Or so she had thought. Standing here in this elegant ballroom, watching this beautiful piano sit silent while people left disappointed, all those old feelings came rushing back. Lisa's supervisor, Mrs. Rodriguez, appeared at her elbow. You okay, honey? You look a little distracted tonight. Lisa forced a smile. I'm fine, just tired. Long week at the diner, Mrs. Rodriguez nodded sympathetically. She had been supervising catering staff for 20 years and had seen it all. I know it's tough working 2 jobs. But hey, at least the tips should be good tonight, even with all this drama about the missing pianist. Actually, Lisa said carefully, the tips might not be so good. Look around, half the tables are empty already. People are leaving because they're disappointed about the music. Mrs. Rodriguez sighed and looked around the room. She was right. The crowd was definitely thinning out. You're probably right. What a mess. That coordinator over there looks like she's about to have a breakdown. Lisa watched the coordinator for a moment. The woman was young, probably in her first big job organizing events like this. A disaster like this could ruin her career before it even got started. The charity would lose money, the sponsors would be angry, and everyone would remember this as the gala where nothing went right. It's such a shame, Lisa said quietly. All these people came here expecting something beautiful, and now they're leaving disappointed, and that piano ... It seems like such a waste to have it just sitting there. Mrs. Rodriguez followed her gaze to the Steinway. Yeah, it's a gorgeous instrument. Probably worth more than I make in 5 years. You know anything about pianos? Lisa hesitated. She had never told anyone at work about her musical background. It seemed irrelevant to her life now, like a story from someone else's childhood. A little. I used to play when I was younger. Oh, really? Like how to play Happy Birthday or actually play. I was pretty serious about it for a while. Before life got in the way? Mrs. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. How serious is pretty serious? Lisa felt heat rising in her cheeks. She wasn't used to talking about this part of her life. I don't know, I won some competitions in high school. Took lessons for about 12 years. I was accepted to a music program in college but couldn't afford to go. 12 years? Mrs. Rodriguez looked impressed. That's not just messing around, that's real training. It was a long time ago, Lisa said quickly. I haven't played seriously in years. I don't even own a piano anymore. But even as she said it, Lisa knew it wasn't entirely true. Yes, it had been years since she had access to a real piano, but she still found herself playing imaginary keys. On tabletops when she was thinking, she still heard music in her head, still felt rhythms in her daily movements. The passion had never really died, it had just been buried. Under bills and responsibilities and the daily struggle to survive, Mrs. Rodriguez was studying her face with new interest. I've been doing this job for 20 years, and I've learned that sometimes the most unexpected solutions come from the most unexpected places. What do you mean? I mean, look at this situation. We've got a room full of disappointed people, a beautiful piano that nobody's playing, and apparently a trained pianist serving dessert? Seems like maybe the universe is trying to tell us something. Lisa's eyes widened. Oh no, I couldn't. I'm not. I don't belong up there. I'm just the help. Says who? Mrs. Rodriguez asked. Those people don't care if you're wearing a uniform or an evening gown. They just want to hear beautiful music. And from what you're telling me, you might be able to give them exactly what they came here for. Lisa looked around the room again. More people were leaving every minute. The elderly woman who had been missing her late husband was gathering her purse, her face sad with disappointment. The businessman was shaking his head as he explained something to his important clients. The whole evening was falling apart, and there was nothing anyone could do about it, or maybe there was. Lisa stood frozen in place, her heart pounding so hard she was sure Mrs. Rodriguez could hear it. The idea was crazy. Absolutely insane. She was a waitress, not a performer. These people had paid hundreds of dollars to hear a world-famous pianist. Not some girl who used to play piano years ago. I can't, she whispered, shaking her head. What if I mess up? What if I forget how to play? What if they hate it? Mrs. Rodriguez placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Honey, look around this room. Half these people are already walking to the door. The night is already ruined. The worst thing that could happen is you play badly and people leave, but they're leaving anyway. At least if you try, there's a chance you could save the evening. Lisa's eyes swept across the ballroom. Mrs. Rodriguez was right. Table after table sat empty now, chairs pushed back where people had gotten up to leave. The charity was losing donors, the hotel was losing business, and all those people were going home disappointed. The whole evening was falling apart in slow motion. Near the exit, she saw the elderly woman from table 7 moving slowly toward the door with her walker. The sadness on her face was heartbreaking. This woman had come here hoping to hear beautiful music, maybe to remember her late husband, and instead she was leaving with nothing but disappointment. But what if I'm not good enough anymore? Lisa asked, her voice barely audible. It's been so long since I played for anyone but myself. There's only one way to find out, Mrs. Rodriguez said softly. And honestly, at this point, what do you have to lose? Lisa closed her eyes and tried to imagine herself walking up to that piano. The thought made her stomach flip with terror. All those important people staring at her, judging her, waiting for her to fail. She had spent years learning to be invisible in rooms like this. How could she suddenly step into the spotlight? But then she thought about her grandmother. What would she say if she were here? Lisa could almost hear her voice. Music is a gift, dear. When you have a gift that can bring joy to others, you have a responsibility to share it. I don't even know what I would play, Lisa said, grasping for excuses. I haven't practiced in years. My fingers probably don't even remember how to move properly. What did you used to love playing the most? Mrs. Rodriguez asked. When you were young and playing just for the joy of it, what made your heart sing? Without hesitation, Lisa answered, Chopin. I love Chopin. His Balladna one was my favorite piece in high school. I must have played it 1,000 times. Then play that? But it's so difficult. There are parts where I used to struggle even when I was practicing every day, Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. I bet it's like riding a bicycle. The music is still in your hands, in your heart. You just have to trust yourself. Lisa looked at the piano again. From this distance, it looked enormous, intimidating. But she could also see its beauty, the way the light reflected off its polished surface. It was calling to her, had been calling to her all evening. Maybe it was time to listen. What would I even say to the coordinator? Lisa asked. She doesn't know me. She think I'm crazy. Leave that to me, Mrs. Rodriguez said. I've worked with these event people before. Right now, that woman would probably let a trained monkey play piano if it would save her job. You're Not a monkey. You're a classically trained musician who happens to be wearing a uniform instead of an evening gown. Lisa's hands were shaking now. The fear was overwhelming, but underneath it, something else was stirring: excitement, hope, the old familiar thrill she used to feel before a performance. It had been so long since she had felt that way about anything. "What if people think I'm being presumptuous?" she asked. "What if they think I'm some delusional waitress who thinks she can play piano? Then they'll learn something about judging people by their uniforms," Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly. "Lisa, I've watched you work for 3 years. You move with grace, you have perfect timing, you notice everything around you. Those are the same skills that make a good musician. You belong up there as much as anyone." Across the room, Lisa could see the event coordinator still frantically making phone calls. The poor woman looked desperate, defeated. Her career was probably on the line tonight. If Lisa could somehow help save the evening, wouldn't that be worth the risk? "My grandmother used to say that music was the language of the soul," Lisa said. Quietly. She said it could heal broken hearts and bring people together when nothing else could. Sounds like a wise woman. She would have wanted me to try, wouldn't she? She always said I was meant to share my music with the world, not hide it away. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded. "I think she would be very proud of you for even considering it." Lisa took a deep breath. Her whole body was trembling now, but it wasn't just fear anymore. It was anticipation. For the first time in years, she was about to do something that mattered, something that could make a real difference in people's lives. "Okay," she said suddenly, before she could change her mind. "Okay, I'll ask, but if they say no, that's it. I'll have tried and we can all go home knowing we did our best." Mrs. Rodriguez grinned. "That's my girl. Come on, let's go talk to the coordinator before you lose your nerve." As they walked across the ballroom toward the front of the room, Lisa felt like she was moving through a dream. Her legs felt unsteady, her heart was racing, and her palms were sweating. But with each step, the piano grew larger, more real, more possible. They passed the elderly woman with the walker, who was moving very slowly toward the exit, on impulse. Lisa stopped. "Excuse me, ma'am." The woman looked up, surprised to be addressed by a member of the waitstaff. "Yes, dear? I just wanted to say, please don't leave yet. I think there might still be music tonight after all." The woman's eyes lit up with curiosity. "Oh, they found another pianist?" Lisa smiled, feeling a surge of confidence she hadn't felt in years. "Something like that. Would you mind staying just a few more minutes? I promise it will be worth your time." The woman studied Lisa's face and seemed to see something there that made her decide to trust this young waitress. "Well, I suppose I could wait a little longer. My driver isn't coming for another half hour anyway." "Thank you," Lisa said, and she meant it with all her heart. As they continued toward the coordinator, Mrs. Rodriguez whispered, "See, you're already making people believe. That's the mark of a true performer." Lisa straightened her shoulders and smoothed her uniform. In a few minutes, she would either be making the biggest mistake of her life or fulfilling a destiny she had almost forgotten she had. Either way, there was no turning back now. The moment of decision had arrived. Lisa walked toward the piano, and with each step, the sounds of the ballroom seemed to fade away. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears, but her legs carried her forward with surprising steadiness. Behind her, she could hear Miss Patterson quickly whispering instructions to her assistant about how to handle this unprecedented situation. The piano seemed to grow larger as she approached it. This close, she could see every detail of its beautiful craftsmanship. The wood was polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the crystal chandeliers above. The bench was covered in rich burgundy velvet that looked like it had never been sat on. This wasn't just an instrument, it was a work of art. As Lisa reached for the bench to adjust its height, she noticed her hands weren't shaking anymore. Something strange was happening to her. The fear that had been consuming her just minutes ago was melting away, replaced by a familiar feeling she hadn't experienced in years. It was the same calm focus she used to feel before performances in high school, when the world would narrow down to just her and the music. She sat down and placed her fingers on the keys for the first time in so long. The ivory felt cool and smooth under her fingertips. She pressed down gently on middle C, and the single note rang out pure and clear. The sound seemed to cut through all the chatter in the room, and she noticed a few people nearby turning to look. Behind her, the conversations were continuing, but she could feel the energy in the room starting to shift. Ms. Patterson had moved to the microphone at the front of the room, preparing to make some kind of announcement. Lisa knew she had maybe 30 seconds before all eyes would be on her. She closed her eyes and let her fingers find their positions for the opening of Chopin's Ballade No. 1. The muscle memory was still there, just like Mrs. Rodriguez had predicted. Her hands knew exactly where to go, even after all these years. It was like greeting an old friend. "Ladies and gentlemen," Miss Patterson's voice came through the sound system, "I have some unexpected good news about tonight's entertainment." The chatter in the room began to quiet down. Lisa could feel people starting to pay attention, though she kept her eyes closed and focused on the music that was about to flow through her. "While we weren't able to bring you the pianist we had originally scheduled, we've discovered that we have someone equally talented right here with us tonight. I'd like to introduce Lisa, who will be performing Chopin's Ballade No. 1 for us." Now the room was getting quiet. Lisa could sense people turning in their chairs, curious about this last-minute replacement. She heard someone whisper, "Who is that? I don't recognize her." Another voice said, "Is she wearing a uniform?" Lisa opened her eyes and looked out at the audience. Some people were still talking quietly, but many were watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. She could see the elderly woman from table 7 had stopped her slow journey to the exit and was now standing near the back, leaning on her walker and watching with interest. For just a moment, the old fears tried to creep back in. These people were expecting perfection. They were used to hearing world-class musicians perform. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she made mistakes? What if they laughed at her? But then she remembered her grandmother's words, "Music isn't about being perfect, dear. It's about sharing your heart with others." Lisa took a deep breath and placed her hands in position. The opening of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 began quietly, almost mysteriously. The first few notes were simple, but they carried so much emotion. As her fingers moved across the keys, years of suppressed longing poured out through the music. The melody started soft and contemplative, like someone remembering a beautiful dream. Lisa felt herself sinking into the music, forgetting about the uniform she was wearing, forgetting about the fancy people watching her, forgetting about everything except the story she was telling through the piano. The conversations in the room stopped completely now. Even the staff members who had been clearing tables paused in their work to listen. There was something magical happening, something none of them had expected from this young woman in the catering uniform. As the piece developed, Lisa's playing grew more confident. The melody became more complex, more passionate. Her fingers danced across the keys with the kind of grace that only comes from years of dedicated practice. The technical difficulties that had once challenged her seemed to dissolve under her touch. The music swelled and grew, filling every corner of the enormous ballroom. Lisa could feel the emotion building in the piece, and she let it flow through her without holding anything back. This was what she had been born to do. This was who she really was. Underneath the uniform and the humble job and the daily struggle to make ends meet, people throughout the room were putting down their phones, setting aside their conversations, and simply listening. The businessman from table 6, who had been so worried about impressing his clients, found himself completely absorbed in the music. The woman from table 3, who had been checking her phone all evening, slowly placed it face down on the table and gave Lisa her full attention. As the piece moved into its more dramatic sections, Lisa's whole body became part of the performance. Her shoulders swayed with the melody, her face reflected the emotions of the music. She was no longer just playing the piano, she was becoming the music itself. The technical passages that had once given her trouble now flowed effortlessly under her fingers. Years of muscle memory, combined with the raw emotion she was feeling, created something extraordinary. This wasn't just a performance. It was a release of everything she had kept locked inside for so many years. In the audience, people were beginning to realize they were witnessing something special. This wasn't just competent playing from an unexpected source. This was artistry of the highest level. The young woman at the piano was pouring her soul into every note, and it was impossible not to be moved by it. The elderly woman with the walker had tears in her eyes. This was exactly what she had come here hoping to experience, music that touched the heart and reminded her of all the beautiful moments in her life. She thought of her late husband, who would have loved this performance. Near the front of the room, Miss Patterson stood with her mouth slightly open, hardly believing what she was hearing. This wasn't just saving the evening, this was making it better than it ever could have been with the originally scheduled performer. There was something raw and honest about Lisa's playing that no amount of fame or reputation could provide. The piece built toward its climactic moments, and Lisa played with such intensity that people throughout the room found themselves holding their breath. She had transformed completely from the quiet, invisible waitress who had been refilling their water glasses just minutes ago. Now she was a force of nature, channeling years of dreams and disappointments into something transcendently beautiful. As the music reached its peak, Lisa felt a joy she hadn't experienced since childhood. This was why her grandmother had insisted on those piano lessons. This was why she had practiced scales for hours when other kids were playing outside. This moment, right here, was worth everything. Lisa walked toward the piano, and with each step, the sounds of the ballroom seemed to fade away. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears, but her legs carried her forward with surprising steadiness. Behind her, she could hear Miss Patterson quickly whispering instructions to her assistant about how to handle this unprecedented situation. The piano seemed to grow larger as she approached it. This close, she could see every detail of its beautiful craftsmanship. The wood was polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the crystal chandeliers above. The bench was covered in rich burgundy velvet that looked like it had never been sat on. This wasn't just an instrument, it was a work of art. As Lisa reached for the bench to adjust its height, she noticed her hands weren't shaking anymore. Something strange was happening to her. The fear that had been consuming her just minutes ago was melting away, replaced by a familiar feeling she hadn't experienced in years. It was the same calm focus she used to feel before performances in high school, when the world would narrow down to just her and the music. She sat down and placed her fingers on the keys for the first time in so long. The ivory felt cool and smooth under her fingertips. She pressed down gently on middle C, and the single note rang out pure and clear. The sound seemed to cut through all the chatter in the room, and she noticed a few people nearby turning to look. Behind her, the conversations were continuing, but she could feel the energy in the room starting to shift. Ms. Patterson had moved to the microphone at the front of the room, preparing to make some kind of announcement. Lisa knew she had maybe 30 seconds before all eyes would be on her. She closed her eyes and let her fingers find their positions for the opening of Chopin's Ballade No. 1. The muscle memory was still there, just like Mrs. Rodriguez had predicted. Her hands knew exactly where to go, even after all these years. It was like greeting an old friend. "Ladies and gentlemen," Miss Patterson's voice came through the sound system, "I have some unexpected good news about tonight's entertainment." The chatter in the room began to quiet down. Lisa could feel people starting to pay attention, though she kept her eyes closed and focused on the music that was about to flow through her. "While we weren't able to bring you the pianist we had originally scheduled, we've discovered that we have someone equally talented right here with us tonight. I'd like to introduce Lisa, who will be performing Chopin's Ballade No. 1 for us." Now the room was getting quiet. Lisa could sense people turning in their chairs, curious about this last-minute replacement. She heard someone whisper, "Who is that? I don't recognize her." Another voice said, "Is she wearing a uniform?" Lisa opened her eyes and looked out at the audience. Some people were still talking quietly, but many were watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. She could see the elderly woman from table 7 had stopped her slow journey to the exit and was now standing near the back, leaning on her walker and watching with interest. For just a moment, the old fears tried to creep back in. These people were expecting perfection. They were used to hearing world-class musicians perform. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she made mistakes? What if they laughed at her? But then she remembered her grandmother's words. Music isn't about being perfect, dear. It's about sharing your heart with others. Lisa took a deep breath and placed her hands in position. The opening of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 began quietly, almost mysteriously. The first few notes were simple, but they carried so much emotion. As her fingers moved across the keys, years of suppressed longing poured out through the music. The melody started soft and contemplative, like someone remembering a beautiful dream. Lisa felt herself sinking into the music, forgetting about the uniform she was wearing, forgetting about the fancy people watching her, forgetting about everything except the story she was telling through the piano. The conversations in the room stopped completely now. Even the staff members who had been clearing tables paused in their work to listen. There was something magical happening, something none of them had expected from this young woman in the catering uniform. As the piece developed, Lisa's playing grew more confident. The melody became more complex, more passionate. Her fingers danced across the keys with the kind of grace that only comes from years of dedicated practice. The technical difficulties that had once challenged her seemed to dissolve under her touch. The music swelled and grew, filling every corner of the enormous ballroom. Lisa could feel the emotion building in the piece, and she let it flow through her without holding anything back. This was what she had been born to do. This was who she really was. Underneath the uniform and the humble job and the daily struggle to make ends meet, people throughout the room were putting down their phones, setting aside their conversations, and simply listening. The businessman from table 6, who had been so worried about impressing his clients, found himself completely absorbed in the music. The woman from table 3, who had been checking her phone all evening, slowly placed it face down on the table and gave Lisa her full attention. As the piece moved into its more dramatic sections, Lisa's whole body became part of the performance. Her shoulders swayed with the melody, her face reflected the emotions of the music. She was no longer just playing the piano, she was becoming the music itself. The technical passages that had once given her trouble now flowed effortlessly under her fingers. Years of muscle memory, combined with the raw emotion she was feeling, created something extraordinary. This wasn't just a performance. It was a release of everything she had kept locked inside for so many years. In the audience, people were beginning to realize they were witnessing something special. This wasn't just competent playing from an unexpected source. This was artistry of the highest level. The young woman at the piano was pouring her soul into every note, and it was impossible not to be moved by it. The elderly woman with the walker had tears in her eyes. This was exactly what she had come here hoping to experience, music that touched the heart and reminded her of all the beautiful moments in her life. She thought of her late husband, who would have loved this performance. Near the front of the room, Miss Patterson stood with her mouth slightly open, hardly believing what she was hearing. This wasn't just saving the evening, this was making it better than it ever could have been with the originally scheduled performer. There was something raw and honest about Lisa's playing that no amount of fame or reputation could provide. The piece built toward its climactic moments, and Lisa played with such intensity that people throughout the room found themselves holding their breath. She had transformed completely from the quiet, invisible waitress who had been refilling their water glasses just minutes ago. Now she was a force of nature, channeling years of dreams and disappointments into something transcendently beautiful. As the music reached its peak, Lisa felt a joy she hadn't experienced since childhood. This was why her grandmother had insisted on those piano lessons. This was why she had practiced scales for hours when other kids were playing outside. This moment, right here, was worth everything. As the final notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 rang out across the ballroom, Lisa's hands slowly lifted from the keys. The last beautiful sounds seemed to hang in the air for a moment, as if the universe itself was reluctant to let the magic end. Then complete silence. Lisa sat perfectly still at the piano bench, her heart still racing from the intensity of the performance. She had poured everything into those 10 minutes, every dream she had given up, every moment of doubt, every memory of her grandmother's encouragement. Now it was over, and she wasn't sure what would happen next. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds. Lisa could hear her own breathing, could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on her. She was almost afraid to turn around and face the audience. What if they were sitting there in shocked disappointment? What if her playing had been worse than she thought? Then, from somewhere in the back of the room, came the sound of one person clapping. Slow, deliberate applause that cut through the silence like a bell. Lisa turned slightly and saw that it was the elderly woman with the walker. Tears were streaming down her face as she clapped, her expression filled with pure joy. "Bravo!" the woman called out in a voice that trembled with emotion. "Bravo!" As if her voice had broken a spell, the rest of the audience suddenly came alive. One by one, then in groups, then all at once, people began to applaud. But this wasn't polite, obligatory clapping. This was the kind of thunderous ovation usually reserved for concert halls and opera houses. Lisa turned fully around on the piano bench, her eyes wide with amazement. People were not just clapping, they were standing up. Table after table of guests rose to their feet, their applause growing louder and more enthusiastic by the second. Some were wiping tears from their eyes. Others were shaking their heads, in wonder, as if they couldn't quite believe what they had just witnessed. "Incredible!" someone shouted from the middle of the room. Absolutely incredible. Near the front, the businessman who had been worried about impressing his clients was now beaming as he applauded. He leaned over to one of his guests and said, "Now that's what I call entertainment. I've never heard anything like it." Miss Patterson stood near the microphone, her professional composure completely forgotten. She was clapping so hard her hands were turning red, and there were tears of relief and amazement streaming down her cheeks. The disaster she had feared was turning into the most memorable evening of her career. The applause continued for what felt like minutes. Lisa had never experienced anything like this, not even during her competition days in high school. The energy in the room was electric, almost overwhelming. She could feel the genuine appreciation and emotion from every person. In the audience, as the initial wave of applause began to settle, people started moving closer to the piano. They wanted to meet this unexpected star, to understand how someone who had been serving their dinner just minutes ago could play with such extraordinary skill and passion. The first person to reach her was the elderly woman with the walker. Despite her slow movement, she had somehow made her way through the crowd with determination. When she reached Lisa, she gently took her hands. "My dear," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "that was the most beautiful thing I've heard in years. You reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place. My late husband would have adored your playing." Lisa felt her own eyes filling with tears. "Thank you so much. That means everything to me. What's your name, dear?" "I want to remember this moment forever. Lisa, just Lisa," the woman smiled warmly. "Well, just Lisa, you have a gift that shouldn't be hidden away. Promise me you won't let this be the last time you share it with the world." Before Lisa could respond, more people were surrounding the piano. A distinguished woman in an elegant blue dress pushed through the small crowd that was forming. "Excuse me," she said with the authority of someone used to being listened to. "I'm Dr. Margaret Whitfield. I sit on the board of the Metropolitan Conservatory, and I've been involved in classical music education for over 30 years. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. She had heard of Dr. Whitfield. The woman was practically a legend in the local music community. Her foundation had helped launch the careers of dozens of professional musicians. "I have to ask," Dr. Whitfield continued, "where did you study? Who was your teacher? I've heard graduates from Juilliard who don't play with the emotional depth you just demonstrated." Lisa felt her cheeks burning. I didn't go to music school. I took lessons when I was young, but I couldn't afford college. I work at a diner downtown. This job tonight is just my second job to help pay bills." Dr. Whitfield's eyebrows shot up in surprise. You're self-taught beyond childhood lessons? That's extraordinary. The technique, the interpretation, the sheer musicality, it's remarkable. More people were gathering around now, all wanting to talk to Lisa. She recognized some faces from the society pages of the newspaper. These were people who attended every major cultural event in the city. They were the ones who decided which artists got funding, which venues got support, which musicians got opportunities. A man in an expensive suit introduced himself as David Chun, a music producer who worked with the city's symphony orchestra. I have to know, do you have any recordings? Any upcoming performances? Because I'd love to discuss some opportunities with you. Lisa's head was spinning. An hour ago, she had been invisible, just another member of the serving staff. Now she was surrounded by some of the most influential people in the city's music scene, all of them eager to talk to her. I don't understand, she said, looking around at all the interested faces. I'm nobody special. I'm just a waitress who used to play piano. Dr. Whitfield laughed gently. My dear, what you just did up there was anything but ordinary. You took a piece that I've heard performed hundreds of times and made it sound fresh and new. You connected with every person in this room in a way that most professional performers never achieve. The businessman from Table 6 had joined the group around the piano. I brought 3 potential clients here tonight, he said to Lisa. I was worried the evening would be a disaster after the original pianist canceled. Instead, you've given us an experience we'll never forget. My clients are already asking when they can hear you perform again. Lisa looked around the room and saw that most of the guests who had been leaving were now back at their tables, energized and excited. The atmosphere had completely transformed from disappointment to celebration. People were talking animatedly, sharing their reactions to her performance. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared at Lisa's elbow, beaming with pride. I told you so, she whispered. I knew you had something special. Miss Patterson finally made her way over to the piano, her earlier stress replaced by obvious relief and gratitude. Lisa, I owe you an enormous apology for doubting you. And more than that, I owe you my career. You didn't just save tonight, you made it legendary. As Lisa looked around at all these people, from the elderly woman still dabbing at her tears, to the influential Dr. Whitfield, she realized that her life had just changed forever. The quiet, invisible waitress was gone. In her place was someone new, someone who had found her voice again and learned that talent and beauty really could come from the most unexpected places. 3 days after the gala, Lisa was back at the downtown diner, pouring coffee and taking orders just like she had for the past 3 years. But everything felt different now. The memory of that magical evening played over and over in her mind. Like a beautiful dream, she was afraid of forgetting. Her coworkers at the diner had noticed the change in her immediately. You're glowing, her friend Janet had said during the morning shift. Did something happen over the weekend? Lisa had tried to explain about the piano performance, but it sounded so unbelievable even to her own ears. A waitress stepping up to play classical piano for 300 wealthy guests? It was like something from a fairy tale. You should have recorded it, Janet said, refilling the coffee pot. I would have loved to hear you play. I never thought to ask anyone to record it, Lisa admitted. I was too nervous to think about anything except not messing up. But even though she had no recording, Lisa had something better. Business cards. Lots of them. Dr. Whitfield had pressed hers into Lisa's hand before leaving the gala, along with a handwritten note on the back. Call me tomorrow. We need to talk about your future. The music producer, David Chun, had given her his card too, along with an invitation to visit him at the Symphony Hall. I want to introduce you to our artistic director, he had said. We're always looking for fresh talent for our community outreach programs. And Miss Patterson had practically begged Lisa to play at future charity events. You've ruined me for ordinary entertainment, she had laughed. How am I supposed to book regular performers after what you did? Now, standing behind the counter. At the diner, Lisa pulled Dr. Whitfield's business card from her pocket and stared at it for the 100th time. The elegant lettering read, Margaret Whitfield Foundation, supporting tomorrow's musical artists. Below that was a phone number that could change Lisa's entire life, but calling felt impossible. What would she say? Hi, this is the Waitress. From Saturday night? These people lived in a completely different world from hers. Maybe in the excitement of the moment they had said things they didn't really mean. You going to stare at that card all day, or are you going to use it? Janet asked, noticing Lisa's distraction. I don't know if I should, Lisa admitted. What if they don't remember me? What if they were just being polite? Girl, you said they gave you a standing ovation. That doesn't sound like polite to me. Before Lisa could respond, the bell above the diner door chimed, and she looked up to see someone she never expected to walk into her workplace. Dr. Whitfield herself stood in the doorway. Looking slightly out of place in her expensive coat and pearls, but wearing a warm smile, Lisa's heart nearly stopped. Dr. Whitfield, what are you doing here? The older woman approached the counter with an amused expression. When you didn't call yesterday or this morning, I decided to come find you. I hope you don't mind. I asked around and learned you worked here. Lisa's cheeks burned with embarrassment. Here was one of the most respected women in the city's arts community, standing in the humble diner where Lisa served pancakes and burgers. I'm so sorry I didn't call. I wasn't sure. I didn't know if you really meant... Of course I meant it, Dr. Whitfield said gently. Lisa, do you have any idea how rare what you did on Saturday night was? I've been involved in classical music for 30 years, and I can count on one hand the number of times I've been moved to tears by a performance. Janet was watching this conversation with wide eyes, clearly impressed that someone so elegant had come looking for Lisa. She quietly moved to take care of the other customers. Giving them space to talk, Dr. Whitfield sat down at the counter. May I have a cup of coffee? And then I'd like to talk to you about an opportunity that could change your life. Lisa's hands shook slightly as she poured the coffee. What kind of opportunity? My foundation provides full scholarships to promising musicians who need financial support to pursue their dreams. We cover tuition, living expenses, everything. In return, our scholarship recipients commit to giving back to the community through performances and teaching. Lisa set the coffee cup down carefully, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. You want to give me a scholarship? I want to give you a chance to become the artist you were meant to be, Dr. Whitfield said. But first, I need to know, is this something you really want? Are you willing to work harder than you've ever worked in your life? Because talent alone isn't enough. It takes dedication, sacrifice, and absolute commitment. Lisa thought about her life as it was now, working 2 jobs just to pay rent and help with her mother's medical bills, coming home exhausted every night, with no time or energy for the things that truly mattered to her, living paycheck to paycheck with no hope of anything better. Yes, she said without hesitation. I want it more than anything, Dr. Whitfield smiled. Good, because I've already spoken to the director of the Metropolitan Conservatory. They're willing to accept you into their performance program based on what I told them about Saturday night, but they want to hear you play first. Can you audition next week? Lisa felt dizzy. The Metropolitan Conservatory? But that's one of the best music schools in the country. I could never afford. The scholarship covers everything, Dr. Whitfield repeated, plus a small living stipend. You wouldn't need to work while you're studying. You could focus entirely on your music. But what about my jobs? My mother's medical bills? I can't just abandon my responsibilities. Dr. Whitfield's expression softened. Tell me about your mother. Lisa explained about her mother's ongoing health issues and the crushing medical debt that kept the family struggling. Dr. Whitfield listened quietly, nodding with understanding. The foundation has resources for situations like this, she said. Finally, we believe that financial stress shouldn't prevent talented artists from pursuing their dreams. We can help with your family's immediate needs while you get your education. Lisa gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. I don't understand why you would do this for me. You barely know me. I know enough, Dr. Whitfield said. know that you have a rare gift, and I know that you had the courage to share it when it mattered most. But more than that, I know what it's like to have dreams that seem impossible. She paused to sip her coffee, then continued. 40 years ago, I was a young woman from a poor family who wanted to study music. Someone took a chance on me, and it changed my entire life. Now it's my turn to do the same for others. Lisa felt tears welling up in her eyes. What would I have to do? Audition next Thursday at 2 p.m. Play the same piece you played Saturday night. It's clearly one where you can show your best work. If they accept you, classes start in 6 weeks. 6 weeks? Lisa's mind raced. But I'd need to give notice at both jobs, find someone to help with my mother, figure out where to live near the conservatory. All manageable problems, Dr. Whitfield assured her. The foundation has staff who help with these transitions. You wouldn't be doing this alone? Lisa looked around the diner, at Janet wiping down tables, at the familiar worn booths and cracked vinyl seats, at the life she had built, out of necessity rather than choice. For the first time, she could imagine something different, something better. If I do this, she said slowly, and if I succeed, what happens after I graduate? Dr. Whitfield's eyes twinkled. Then you become exactly what you're meant to be, a professional musician who brings beauty into the world. And someday, maybe you'll be sitting in a little diner somewhere, offering the same chance to another young person with impossible dreams. Lisa took a deep breath and made the decision that would change everything. Yes, I want to audition. I want to try. Dr. Whitfield smiled and stood up. Excellent. I'll have my assistant call you with all the details. And Lisa? Yes? Stop doubting yourself. Saturday night proved you belong in the music world. Now you just need to believe it. 3 months later, Lisa stood backstage at the Metropolitan Concert Hall, adjusting the skirt of her new black evening gown. Her hands weren't shaking anymore, not like they had at the charity gala. This time she knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of. Through a crack in the curtain, she could see the audience filling the elegant concert hall. The red velvet seats were almost completely full, and people were still streaming through the doors. This wasn't just any performance. It was her debut recital as a scholarship student at the Metropolitan Conservatory, and the whole music community had turned out to see the young woman who had become something of a local legend. In the front row, Lisa could see her mother sitting proudly, wearing the new dress Lisa had bought her with money from her first paid performance last month. Her mother's health had improved dramatically since she no longer had to worry about medical bills, thanks to the Foundation's assistance program. The relief of knowing her family was taken care of had lifted a weight from Lisa's shoulders that she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. Next to her mother sat Mrs. Rodriguez, who had gotten the evening off from the catering company specifically to attend. She was beaming with pride, and Lisa knew she was probably telling everyone within earshot that she had been the one to encourage Lisa to play that first night. Dr. Whitfield was there too, of course, sitting with several other board members from her foundation. She had been Lisa's biggest supporter through the challenging transition from working 2 jobs to being a full-time student. There had been difficult moments, times when Lisa felt overwhelmed by the academic requirements or intimidated by classmates who had been preparing for this their whole lives. But Dr. Whitfield had always been there with encouragement and practical advice. 5 minutes, Lisa, called the stage manager. Lisa nodded and took a deep breath. The past 3 months had been like living in a dream. The audition at the conservatory had gone better than she could have hoped. She had played Chopin's Ballade No. 1 again, and by the time she finished, the panel of judges was already discussing scholarship details. The transition hadn't been easy. Leaving her jobs at the diner and with the catering company had been emotional. Janet and the other waitresses had thrown her a goodbye party, and several regular customers had come by to wish her well. Even Miss Patterson had offered her a standing invitation to play at future charity events. Now, for a substantial fee rather than as a favor, living near the conservatory had been an adjustment, too. Lisa's tiny studio apartment was nothing fancy, but it came with something she hadn't had in years, a piano. Not a grand piano like the one at the hotel, but a decent upright that the foundation had provided. She practiced for hours every day, making up for lost time and preparing for the rigorous performance schedule that conservatory students maintained. Her professors had been amazed by her natural musicality, though they'd had to work hard to fill in gaps in her technical training. "You play with more emotional maturity than students twice your age," her main instructor, Professor Williams, had told her. "But we need to give you the technical foundation to support that artistry." The work had been intense, but Lisa had thrown herself into it with the same determination that had gotten her through years of working double shifts. She studied music theory, practiced technique exercises, and performed in master classes where famous musicians critiqued her playing. Each challenge made her stronger and more confident. Word about her story had spread through the classical music community. The local newspaper had written a feature article about the waitress who became a conservatory star. Classical music blogs had picked up the story, and she had been invited to perform at several charity events, this time as the featured artist rather than the help, but tonight was different. Tonight was her official debut as a serious classical musician. The program included not just the Chopin piece that had started it all, but also works by Bach, Beethoven, and a contemporary composer. It was a challenging program that would showcase the full range of skills she had developed over the past 3 months. "Places, Lisa, you're on." Lisa walked to the wings and peered out at the stage. The concert grand piano sat under the bright lights, looking magnificent and welcoming. This was her moment, the moment she had been preparing for without even knowing it for most of her life. She walked onto the stage. The audience burst into applause. She recognized many faces from that night at the charity gala, but there were new faces too: music students, local musicians, and classical music lovers who had heard about her story and wanted to witness this remarkable journey. Lisa sat at the piano bench and adjusted it to the perfect height. She placed her hands on the keys and felt that familiar sense of coming home. This was where she belonged. Not serving coffee at a diner or clearing plates at fancy events, but here, making music that could touch people's hearts. She began with Bach's Italian Concerto, her fingers moving with precision and grace through the complex passages. The months of intensive study had paid off. Her technique was stronger than it had ever been, and she played with a confidence that came from knowing she truly belonged in this world. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every note. Lisa could feel their attention and appreciation, but she wasn't nervous anymore. She was exactly where she was meant to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. When she finished the batch, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. She moved on to Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, playing the famous first movement with such tenderness that she could see people in the audience wiping their eyes. The music flowed through her like a river, natural and unstoppable. For her final piece, she had chosen Chopin's Ballade No. 1, the piece that had changed her life. As she began the opening notes, Lisa thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a scared waitress afraid to be noticed to a confident performer ready to share her gift with the world. The performance was flawless, but more than that, it was deeply moving. Lisa poured everything into it: her gratitude for the opportunities she'd been given, her love for the people who had supported her, and her excitement for the future that was now unfolding before her. When the final note faded away, the audience erupted in a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. People were shouting, "Bravo!" and some were crying openly. Lisa stood and bowed, feeling overwhelmed by the love and support flowing toward her from the audience. As the applause continued, Lisa looked out at the crowd and saw the elderly woman from the charity gala. She was there with her daughter, clapping enthusiastically and beaming with joy. Their eyes met, and the woman gave her a thumbs up that made Lisa laugh with happiness. After the formal concert ended, Lisa was surrounded by well-wishers and music industry professionals. Record label representatives wanted to discuss contracts. Concert promoters were interested in booking her for tours. Music schools were offering teaching positions for after graduation, but the moment that meant the most was when her mother came backstage, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered as they hugged. "Your grandmother would be over the moon." Dr. Whitfield appeared beside them, smiling broadly. This is just the beginning, you know. Tonight proved that you have what it takes to be a major artist. The question now is, what do you want to do with this gift? Lisa looked around at all the people congratulating her, all the opportunities being offered, all the possibilities stretching out before her. 6 months ago, she had been invisible, serving drinks to people who never noticed her. Now she was being celebrated by those same people as an equal, no, as someone special. I want to keep sharing music with people, Lisa said simply. And I want to help other young musicians who think their dreams are impossible. I want to show them that talent can come from anywhere and that it's never too late to change your life. Dr. Whitfield's eyes twinkled with pride. I think that's exactly what the world needs to hear. As Lisa changed out of her performance gown, later that evening she thought about the girl who had been too scared to even dream of moments like this. That girl was gone now, replaced by someone who understood that courage and talent could overcome any obstacle. The phone in her dressing room rang. Already, interview requests and performance offers were pouring in. Lisa smiled as she answered, ready to embrace whatever came next. Her real life was just beginning.